I am a social activist, environmental activist, black consciousness activist. I am an activist in general, but I'm everything but a gender activist. So I mentioned that specifically because I believe that all of the above covers the question of gender, which I am concerned about too. So the reason why I start by explaining that saying that I'm a social activist is because that's what I do, that's what I've been doing for the past 14 years, ever since I became conscious. And by what I mean by that I became conscious is basically that around 2000 or so, when after trying out a couple of things, studying marketing and studying other things that were going to make me money, I kind of was drawn towards literature, the kind of literature and art, that was actually, that caused me to rethink the meaning of life and the meaning of my existence. So I started asking myself, really, besides I'm studying marketing, so I'm starting to go and sell something for somebody who's making money out of my sweat and tears. Maybe not tears, but sweat and fears and anxieties. So I had to kind of really go for a soul search and see and decide, no, I need to actually do something that's going to help me realize my purpose in life. So I think becoming an activist, it's not actually a conscious thing that you do and say, now I'm going to wear the social activist hat. You kind of find people and stories around you that actually drive you towards a direction. You find alike and you find kindred spirits who are actually working towards the same goal as yourself. So that happened around the time when I started frequenting the Bat Center and other places like Diaconia Center and other and places like there was a place here in Durban run by artists. They call themselves the Third Eye Movement. Or Gabingo, or Zamani, forget his surname. But some of these people that were painters, poets, activists, but mostly they were really visual artists. This was around 99, 2000, 2001. And at the same time, I'm discovering that part of me that was actually making me think outside of the box with those types of people. And around that time, I think that the moment of changing from being a person who's studying to get a job to a person who's studying to gain self-realization was when there was a place on, I think it's called Krat Road or something, or Cleveland, near DUT. So it's called Technical Natal at that time. There was this house run by these women. These women happened to be gay, all three of them. Gabi, Manu, and another woman, Bandi. And there was a guy called Togozan Tet or something like that. They were all visual artists, but Bandi, I think, was more an activist, a social activist, a gender activist. So they started opening me up to ideas about life that I never thought existed. You know, I was a happy-go-lucky type of character. You know, I liked poetry, but I didn't think that I was one. So what happened is there was poetry going on in those spaces. And in fact, the Nowadays poetry session was started by people who were influenced by visual artists. The Third Eye Movement became the Nowadays poets.
So, like, the poetry movement, because nowadays is like one of the main poetry movements, was actually influenced by visual art.
The Nowadays poet was influenced by visual artists and music artists. Okay. People like Kulfire had them. Kulfire was a DJ, reggae DJ. He had a sound system called the 12 Tribes. Baptism of Fire, something like that. 12 Tribes, Baptism of Fire sound system. And him and other characters were DJing in townships and in the inner city, playing reggae music, conscious music that kind of made you think like, wow. the world is more than Coca-Cola and the rest of the consumerist culture thing, you know.
Yeah.
So you start thinking outside. So I was saying there was an event, the crucial moment, the aha moment happened. The Third Eye movement, the Third Eye artists, were doing a show in honor of the spirit of Moses Taiwa Moleleko in Cleveland. So I was kind of discovering that I'm actually a poet. I can actually recite some of the stuff that I'm writing. I thought it was just personal.
So
stuff.
you were writing?
I was writing, but I never thought that what I'm writing could be, should be heard by people.
And what made you decide that it needs to be heard?
Because I realized that any expression, your personal expression, the personal is also social. So the moment I discovered that the personal can also be social is when I realized, no, I mean I heard that people could perform on stages and people were doing, they're talking about famous people, maybe someone is
Oh, okay.
But then there's a difference. I discovered that there's a difference between a poet and imbong per se. You can be writing to praise somebody, or you can write to even, speak truth to power, or speak your truth, or to share knowledge and to just, express yourself in any other way. It doesn't always have to be to share knowledge, but sometimes it's to express maybe your sexuality. Maybe it might be in a box at that particular time, or it might be, some intimate things that you'd like to. You thought maybe you were writing. I mean, at first I was writing for girls, really. I started writing R&B. I was writing lyrics, Babyface.
Oh, okay.
Writing Boys to Men lyrics and whatever. Acting as if they're mine and writing it to a girl.
Oh, okay.
Things like that.
Like you'd listen to the song and then you'd write it out.
Yeah, or I'll write my own version of I'll Make Love to You.
And then
but
when
I did say it in those words exactly. So it happened like that. So it was when me and a friend of mine called Malus Bonam, who had started a business with around the 2000s, a tourism business. We used to write lyrics, and we kept books of lyrics, other people's lyrics, and also our own lyrics. We had this idea that we'll start a kind of like a production company producing music. La Face, it was all influenced by. It's very strange. I was not one of those people who were listening to Public Enemy. I thought Public Enemy was noisy. I could listen to KRS, but I could not listen to Public Enemy. It was too hardcore for me. I was listening to MC Hammer and Vanilla Ice. I'm not ashamed to say that. Yeah. But at the same time, I grew up to say, but there are people like ultramagnetic MCs. There are people like, there's other kind of hip hop that is actually expressing something more than just Babyface.
Yeah.
There's more to life than romance. There's more to lyrics than.
But obviously there's someone who gives you that kind of music.
Yeah, well, it was Stevie Wonder for me, to be honest. It was Stevie Wonder because Stevie Wonder was writing love songs, but he was also writing social commentary. Like, I started, besides I Just Called to Say I Love You, he'll write songs like Black Man. There's a song called Black Man from the Songs in the Key of Life. The whole Songs in the Key of Life thing kind of helped me to write better songs. And then from songs, I graduated to poetry. And from poetry, I graduated to essays and stories, or at least I'm trying to write more stories. So the crucial moment, it's a whole lot of different influences, but most of it comes from music. Music and art. The fact that people are actually creating art that is saying more than just drawing a map of Africa, or drawing a flower, or drawing a still life. They are drawing people experiencing, not just drawing, by the way, sculpture, multimedia, people like Otando Mama. They influenced me a lot. He used to do a lot of video installation. So. The aha moment is the Moses Maseko. Because Moses Maseko's album itself was titled Finding Oneself.
Yeah.
The first album that really influenced me was Finding Oneself, Spirits of Tembisa, those type of records. Music that even though it didn't have lyrics, in fact, but it was evocative. It was speaking about the black experience, the human experience, and it was also spiritual. You know, genes and spirits. I grew up in Guamash. So when I was looking at the title itself, Genes and Spirits, remember I was already very much influenced by words. So I'm looking at genes and spirits, but he's not talking about genes in a typical sense. He's talking about genetic code, but he's also talking about spiritual things. But it sounds like he's talking about alcohol. So the music, jazz, hip hop, R&B, you know, but a certain kind of R&B. I began realizing that there's mainstream music, and then there's crossover, and then there's underground music, you know. So, and the underground is underground for a reason sometimes, not just because they love to be poor, or they just love to keep it from being heard. They want it to be heard, but because it's saying certain, it may be speaking certain messages that mainstream culture are not acceptable maybe in mainstream culture. So there are spaces. There are certain spaces which are frequented by you know, the MC Hammer Babyface types. And then there are certain spaces which are frequented by the poor righteous teachers, the roots, they are soul loving type of stuff. You know, so you start moving with the so-called conscious cats. Yeah, you move into those circles. And around that time also there was a group that was called Black Fist of Gavi. And the Black Fist of Gavi was a hip hop group, but they were talking about issues. They were very much like Dead Prayers or Public Enemy and those types of groups, but they were both, their music was experimental. They were using a lot of South African idioms, you know, a lot of African and black and Rastafarian, and you know, it was like a mix of jazz, Rastafari, hip hop, all together. And in their music, they were always pushing the envelope. They were always just kind of trying to rise above the Kwaito tune that was famous at that time, or the hip hop tune that was famous at that time. 99, 2000, 2001, 2002. Okay. Yeah, we are old, eh? We're kind of ancient. But we're the ancient future. Yeah. In a way. If the future would allow us access. Yeah, so, yeah, that's it. That's the influence. That's who Menzi Maseko is. I know it was a long story, but in a nutshell, a big nutshell. That's how Menzi became involved in Durban poetry. And then we formed a committee with all those people who some of them were using Bed Center as a studio, like Okabingo and all of them. They were using the Bed Center as a studio, for a place for exhibiting and for working. So we had space, and then we started something called a Writer's Corner. Okay. Before there was, nowadays poets, there was something called Writer's Corner, just upstairs in the studio. And the Writer's Corner was a place where we'd bring books, collect different literature, different music, and we'd share ideas about what is it that you want to do with what we are doing as poets, as visual artists. How do we take it out to the world, and how do we make a living out of it? Because obviously this is a full-time task. We are actually doing this for life. You know, how do we pay rent doing what we are doing? So the Writer's Corner was a kind of place where the nowadays poets and the visual artists, that's when we were beginning to kind of shape our ideas into constructive, cooperative businesses and organization, or whether it's NGO or whatever. So we're kind of growing up, of course. As we are growing up, we are starting families, so we're starting to think. The Writer's Corner basically transformed itself into other. I mean, people move on. Some people move to Joburg. Some people move to jobs, to other jobs. So they're not at the Writer's Corner all the time, you know. But the Writer's Corner, most of the time, it was a place where we would make music, we would write, many different groups came out of there. If people are coming from Joburg or coming from wherever around the world, they would go to the Writer's Corner as a kind of place where they can smoke
Okay.
And, you know.
And then that thing.
So then nowadays, it needed to form itself into kind of like a, I mean, because sometimes we're looking for funds, right? We're looking for to fund our movement. So we need the city, we need social development, we need to take our things to the people, and that costs money. We need to publish, we need to make albums, we need to make a living. So what happens is nowadays poet needed to be registered. So Upila Mieni had the idea, spearheaded the whole nowadays. Upila Mieni and Cool Fire had them. They were part of the Writers' Corner too. But they were all working as visual artists, music artists, and all that. But we came together and we formed the Izimbongi, the Simanje. Pila likes to call it Izimbongi, the Simanje Manje. Yeah, and I'm shaking the camera a lot, so I'm creating this. Yeah, so forgive me. We went to social development, or I think it's the Department of Social Welfare. We went to register as an NGO so that we could write proposals to the city or to whoever to fund our movement. And Birth Center, of course, is always in the center of this because it actually offers us a space, a free space, to say that no, Birth Center, I mean, it produces works of art, so poetry is part of it. So it gave us a space here at the functions room. So we were always having the Wednesday. We started the Wednesday sessions. Every Wednesday, 5 till 7. It still continues till today, from 2000 till now.
And then how does it feel now that if someone wants to know about poetry in Durban, like nowadays would be one of the first things?
Nowadays is the first place you go to. How it feels is another thing. How I would like it to be is another thing.
Okay. Which would you like to mention? How you'd like it to be?
It feels good first to know that you have co-created, because this whole thing is co-creation. It's not like it's Pila's thing, it's Cool Fire's thing, it's Menzi's thing. Because out of nowadays poets also came something called sport. It branched into different things. We wanted to do publishing, so publishing needed certain expertise. We wanted to do tours. We were doing things, going to schools, discovering young poets, and helping them to do more creative writing, to study their art. So we're still doing that. The very things that we brainstormed then, most of them have been done. We've published books. We are working on a new anthology for this year. So I'm collecting a lot of poetry to create that anthology. But I love this song. Yeah, anyway, back to the program. We are basically, I'm proud, but I think we can do much more. The biggest challenge is that a lot of poets, especially the young poets, they don't take advantage of the fact that there is a space which is free that they can use to grow they can grow it into a business. We could be having nowadays poets t-shirts, apparel. We could be having a shop out there. I mean, it's 14 years already. You know, we are only be publishing books. We are doing things in schools. We do sports. We do events. I mean, sport is a child of nowadays poets. Slam poetry operation. So it could do more if people could take charge and actually really take responsibility for the session. It must not just be a place where people like to hear the sound of their voices. It must be a place where people actually create work out of it. Because word work is work.